Good evening, everyone. Thanks once again for joining us here at the Data Lab Community, one of our many monthly events, and honoured tonight to be kicking off the Geospatial Fringe. We'll get into more about what that's entailing over the next month in a few slides, but I just wanted to, first of all, thank you all for coming and joining us. My name's Adam Srocker. I'm a member of the Innovation Advisory Board for the Data Lab. I also run a data and AI consultancy here in Scotland, and I'm found on stages up and down the country waffling at crowds like yourselves. For those of you that aren't maybe familiar with what this event's going to be about, we're going to be talking about geospatial data, which underpins stuff that you probably use every day, things from Google Maps to weather forecasts and a lot of the services that make up the infrastructure of everyday life, right? It's a really interesting domain, and it's got some nice quirks compared to like other data domains that make it rich for looking for insights and trying to harvest like clever stuff and interesting use cases. There's no fire drills tonight, so if one goes off, please follow someone that knows where the muster point is outside, probably Stephen. We'll all go out peacefully and quietly and we'll muster outside. We are being live streamed, so thank you very much for joining us at home as well. Encourage everyone in the room and the people online to ask questions when we get into the panel section later. If you're at home, please just put them in the chat and we'll get them. I'll ask like halfway through if anything's come from at home. Only other thing is the format tonight. We're going to have 4 speakers. Really lucky to have some really distinguished speakers and experts in the space. They're going to do some lightning talks on kind of what they're up to in the domain, and then we're going to follow that with a panel discussion. So we're going to get them all up on stage, see if we can make them have a big fight or argument about some sort of hot topic in geospatial. I'll open up the questions to the floor. So if you've got really good questions throughout, save them for the end and we can get to that. And then towards the very end of the session, we like to do these community call-outs, a really successful initiative that the Data Lab community has been doing recently. So there would just be 5 minutes for like a 30-second slot. If you're looking for collaborators, you've got a thing to promote, you want to find volunteers for your charity, or you want to just like congratulate someone or give them kudos, you'll get 30 seconds to stand up and have your piece and go from there. So yeah, look, once again, thank you everyone for joining us. We will just go through a little bit about what we're doing through the next month. So yeah, I talked about the Geospatial Fringe. This is a really exciting event. We're going to have loads of events like this, both virtual and in person, up and down the country, all throughout August. Details up here. You might be unfortunate enough to be subjected to me hosting 1 or 2 of them in the future. We are being supported by loads of really interesting organisations like Geospatial, you've got Dundee Data Meetup, Nature Scott, TechScaler and Codebase, Adena, Teradata, Location Data Scotland, like some of the really big players in geospatial data and the data initiatives that are going on across the country, both Scotland and the wider United Kingdom. So really interesting series of events, and even if you're just here to network, this is going to be a cracking month to kind of meet people in this domain, ask good questions, and hopefully like find some new stuff to sort of talk about and engage on. So I've skipped ahead and talked through the format already. What I would say is to find out more about those events and other things that we do here in this room or elsewhere across Scotland, really well worth joining up with the Data Lab community. It's completely free to use. There's about 6,000 members across 80 odd countries worldwide. Lots of people in the UK, but wider. Great place for like just collaborating with peers and meeting people in the space, finding out about events like this where you can come and get free beer and pizza and listen to people like me waffle at you for 15 minutes, but also listen to really distinguished speakers that understand their domain and really know their stuff. Great initiatives like the peer programs they do and the mentorship programs, leadership cohorts, like special niche subtopics. Highly recommend getting involved with that. If you're on LinkedIn or somewhere as well, like you like the socials, it really helps. This again is a free at point of delivery service provided by Scottish Government, Edinburgh Uni and its partners. Any support you can give by just like tagging us and saying, oh, great event, really enjoyed it, really goes a long way to just show support and show that we're doing the right stuff. honest feedback, things like that. We're really engaged. Really want to make sure this community is like a community for you. It's not like a top-down thing, and we're saying that we want to hear from you. We want to put on events that you want to come to and make this a really valuable experience for you and the wider community as a whole. So you'll be lucky to know that's probably enough from me. I'm going to now introduce you to, one at a time, 4 really good speakers on the topic of geospatial data. And we're going to start off with Bruce Gittings, if you could come to the stage.
Feels as if I've been rather bigged up here in terms of being a good speaker, but we'll see. You can give me your assessment come the end. I'd probably take the prize for being the closest to here, I work in the university over in Drummond Street, so I've had a 150-metre walk, which is nice. I'm also, for my sins, chair of AGI Scotland, and I'll talk a little bit about what AGI is as well. But I thought what I would do, just by way of introduction to the subject, is talk a little bit about geospatial and talk about why I'm passionate about it, and also some of the issues in terms of why it's interesting, why it's a really exciting time in Scotland in terms of geospatial. So that's what I intend to do by way of introduction. I think we can look at the fundamental questions we might ask, the sort of what, who, when, where, and where to me is really the most interesting one. Where and perhaps when, and yes, GIS and geospatial can model that as well, help us in terms of signposting the other questions. Why are species under threat? Who are our customers? We can frame actions. How do we provide services more efficiently? What might we need to do to mitigate climate change? But for me, the where question is absolutely fundamental. So where is geospatial in both senses of the word? If you're ever asking questions with that where word in there, you're probably going to need geospatial, geographical data. Sorry, we tend to use the terms geographical information, geospatial interchangeably, which is very confusing. But it's that form of data that I think helps us make some of the really important decisions in terms of the global challenges that the world is facing, whether, as I say, we're tracking environmental change, climate risk, interest in urban planning, smart cities, tracking disease, pandemics, and so on. And to quote the Beatles, perhaps, that shows my age, geospatial really is everywhere. Everything has a location, whether it's government data, crowdsourced data, surveyors are out there recording and analysing and measuring, statisticians. Everything has a location, everything has a place, and that's why it's really fundamental. We hear a lot these days about place-based policy making. So place is at the centre of what we do. Place is the core of community. We define ourselves by where we're from, where we live, what communities we're part of, and geospatial is crucial to that. So as we move from home to work, whether it's using cars or buses or trams, we see a whole series of located services. Location is really, really important to us on the sorts of things that we do. And geospatial really is everywhere. There are thousands of satellites up in the sky these days. They seem to be increasing in number by the minute almost. And an awful lot of these are dedicated to monitoring various aspects of the Earth and indeed human populations, as well as those rather interesting ones, the GPS, which allows us to locate ourselves even if we've just got a smartphone in terms of the Earth. And actually GPS is one of several constellations that do the same thing. That's the American one. There are European constellations and so on and so forth. So it's not just Google Maps, but it is Google Maps. And if we have to thank Google Maps for one thing, it's actually showing the world the interesting subject that we are part of. And yes, you can get all that satellite data, this immense amount of satellite image data that is also enormously useful and is recollected on an hourly, even minute-to-minute basis these days at enormously high resolution. You can view these sorts of things using tools like Google Maps and so on. So we have an awful lot of data. We have, sorry, this slide is probably slightly overused, grabbed from the internet. There is a bit of a data tsunami. We have all manner of data. I'm talking to many of you are data scientists, you understand this. But actually what geospatial and geospatial tools and GIS software allows us to do is organize and manage that data, or at least the spatial components of it. And that does make life easier in terms of being able to examine this vast geo data mine and extract meaning from it that we can use to understand our world, understand how we populate our world, understand how our world is changing. In terms of applications, I could spend half an hour talking about this slide, don't worry, I won't. But I just thought I'd throw up some symbols and I'll pick on a few of them in terms of the sorts of things that you can do with geospatial. There are some obvious ones in terms of logistics. If you're trying to get goods or services from one place to another, if you're trying to get a pizza delivered, you need geospatial because you need to know where it's coming from, where it's going to, and what the road network is between it. We're using mobile phones that, as I say, connect to GPS, tell us where we are, but they tell us where the services we're interested in as well. If we're looking at the volcano icon there, if we're interested in hazards, so people living in areas which suffer from perhaps earthquake hazards, volcano hazards and so on, geospatial is really, really useful in terms of helping them evacuate before or during the occurrence of these events, but also getting aid in afterwards. I put the Olympic rings up there. If you're organising an event like the Olympics, that is in Paris at the moment, as we all know. There are umpteen venues. People have to get to and from these venues. There are transport connecting issues. But also in terms of the science of sport, your GIS and geospatial data are used in terms of training and exercise, targets and defining what these targets are. Precision agriculture. Farmers don't drive tractors anymore. Tractors drive themselves. They've got GPS on the cab. They plant the fields. They remove weeds from the fields. They harvest the fields as efficiently as they possibly can over wide areas. And they're almost pretty much automated devices. But it's more than that. It's understanding exactly what soil types you've got, where the moisture is, where the nutrients are in your fields, and being able to not fields, but actually just put the right amount in for the crop that you're growing. So I'll kind of stop there, but all manner of interesting applications, and that is both the excitement for me of geospatial, in that there are all these applications, but it's also a bit of an issue in that we're talking to subject specialists, domain specialists in so many different areas and saying, yeah, okay, you need to kind of probably think a little bit about geospatial. So a little bit about where are we. I'm going to get just mildly technical here. It's a bit of self-reflection. I kind of ask myself that question every morning, but that's probably a bit of an age thing. Where are we right now? Well, we're well, not quite there. I've said the old high school, which is where my work is, down in Infirmary Street. There's different ways of describing that. We can describe it as an address, we can describe it as a parcel address, we can describe it as a building, we can describe it as a postcode, which is sort of artificially created construction. We can give it nice convenient coordinates, but if you take one thing away from my talk today, actually latitude and longitude coordinates are not unique. It depends on your spatial referencing system. And they can vary. They can vary in the UK by up to about 100 meters, depending on which spatial referencing system you use. So lots of people do kind of assume that if you've got a latitude and longitude coordinate, you can narrow that down to a few meters, or hey, why not add 32 digits of precision and get it down to a few nanometers? But yeah, it doesn't quite work as simply as that. There's also altitude. So we're about 70 meters above sea level here. We're also moving due to plate tectonics. Actually, we're moving in 2 dimensions because Scotland geologically is kind of rebounding still after the last ice age, so we're moving up at a few millimeters a year. But we're also moving across the Earth relative to the core at a few centimeters a year. And then there are all these sort of geographical divisions that are in there just to confuse the issue a little bit. Yeah, we're within the area of the Old Town Community Council. We are, historically, Edinburgh was in Midlothian, it's not anymore. Historically, it was in Lothian region, it's not anymore, but we're maybe dealing with a time series of data that looks at these different geographical divisions. We're part of Edinburgh University, and we're near the city centre. So sometimes these notions of location are rather more abstract than we might like. Why Scotland? I've got 2 minutes left, so let me zip through this. I think it's a really exciting time to be looking at geospatial in Scotland. The UK is ranked second in the world for geospatial readiness and capability, and I would argue that Scotland leads the UK. Scottish Government, through Location Data Scotland, are really committed to expanding the sector in terms of economic growth. We've already, it's a £6 billion industry in the UK, and I think there's a good proportion of that already in Scotland. But also we've got this remarkable heritage. Those of you who've done stuff in GI may understand the sort of layer model of geographical information and polygon overlay. That was actually defined by Ian McHarg, a landscape architect. He was born in Clydebank. He did this work in the US, but he was born in Clydebank. The first globally used commercial GIS package was produced by one of my former colleagues, Tom Walk, over in the Geography department in 1973. And indeed, Ferranti, a company that you will remember with its associations with Edinburgh, produced the first commercial land information system in the 1970s. So I think there's a great heritage there that we can build on. And there's lots of great people, all of you. My day job, as I say, is a lecturer in the university. I'm graduating students who are also an interesting bunch of people and can contribute to this sector. But also we're doing some really interesting work with Fife College in terms of saying, well, okay, we've got postgraduates, because my students are master's students, but let's look at different levels of education. So we're working with Fife College in terms of college level education. That's unique in the UK. There's nowhere else is doing that. So I think in Scotland we have some distinct advantages. And then just to close, let me emphasise the fact this is a community. So yes, I can wear a hat as chair of AGI in Scotland, and you're welcome to join that. And we have seminars, and it's a free to join network, and we have an annual conference and so on. And that's great. Location Data Scotland, I should give a shout out to as well, who I work with very closely and are doing great things and will help you build your business ideas and have formed a great network that you can involve yourself in. And I'll also give a shout out, but I'll point very much at Gala, who's speaking a second or two in terms of GeoMob, which is a much more informal talk series networking opportunity that happens every 3 months or so. So Gala will tell you more about that. But yeah, get involved. I'm really passionate about it. I really enjoy what I do. And I think it's a really, really exciting area. And I will close there. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, I will just give a shout out, an emphasis to one event of the list that Adam mentioned, which we're organising down in ECCI in Infirmary Street on the 27th. If you want to find out more about the applications, I shot through applications and showed you all these symbols. If you want to find out more about the detailed applications, there will be more coming this evening, but a lot more coming on the 27th as well if you want to find out more there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Brilliant talk. I was having a conversation recently about how loads of these new applications are kind of getting unlocked by increased frequency of like sampling rates for some of these data points and the explosion in sensors out in the wild. So it's cool to see like more and more things come online and see the use cases expand as sort of in line with that. So I'll not keep you long. From our next speaker is Gala Camacho, founder of Diagonal Works.
Thank you. Okay. Here we go. There's a few videos, so hopefully everything goes smoothly, but it's better than a live demo. So I'm here to talk about a couple of projects that we've worked on. I guess kind of as you hear them, I just want you to think about how these projects are so much better because our team was multidisciplinary. And when I say our team was like the team doing it, it wasn't always internally to Diagonal. And how like approaching them as a collaboration is actually what made them more powerful. So the first one I'm going to talk about is when we paired up with a company that does legibility. For those of you who might not know, are not in the urban planning space, legibility is in the city is these people that what they want is for you to walk around the city and know where you're going, or be on a bike and know where you're going. And obviously they have to consider all the different personas of all the different people, but a lot of times their work is good thinking about the different people and the different struggles that they're going to have while moving around the city. And one of the things that they struggle with is that they have a big project, and a city is going like, how much will it cost for you to consider legibility across our whole city? And they don't know how to price that. And so one of the things we were trying to do is, okay, well, which parts could we extract from data to try and help you understand somewhat how difficult this project is going to be? And so one of the things we did is we created a really simple algorithm that what it does is it thinks about the world in 2 dimensions. So it's a simplification, and it's like a little laser, and it goes, okay, if I can see 100 meters and I drop my laser that way and then I go do all the way around, how big is that area that you can see? And we call these sight lines. This is the methodology that we used. Really simply, we want to understand, if you stand here, how much can you see? If you walk 5 meters ahead, how much can you see? And so on. And so the result is here. This is a little thing you can play with in our in one of our blog posts. And basically, you're seeing here this thing as I'm moving the mouse, the area of the polygon that of what you can see. But I'll just play it again. In particular, what I think is really nice is this looks a bit movable, but in there's about 100 polygons that you saw. Then there was 100 polygons we had to compute, and that you could become really smart about computing one from the other. But what we just did is we used parallelizing in the cloud to just get one of these polygons all together. This is something that if you were in general geospatial kind of software would be really hard to visualize. And so we created this little movement things so that you could visualize like all the polygons once in a row, so that you could see, so that they could see, okay, as someone is walking through, they can see a really narrow polygon, or they have a really big area that they can see. And then we did this at scale. So we took all of London and we took every 5 meters. And every 5 meters, we took the entire road network. And every 5 meters, we calculated this polygon. And we did this. And here's me panning around London. And if it looks really red, kind of towards the white, it means that there's a lot of area. Obviously, as you get into the river, there's a lot of area. And this is something that I find really cool because they can now see this map and they can go, is there a lot of red spaces? To them, the red kind of whitish spaces meant that people can see a lot. That tells them they're going to have to take a particular strategy to undertaking legibility in the city. And then they look at the spaces that are really, really dark to take a different strategy and then price their project. So I wanted to share that example, which is something I found really fun to work on. The next example is one actually we ended up doing here in Scotland. And mostly what we wanted to do was work, South of Scotland Enterprise was working with vacant land. And what they want to know is we have this vacant land, like how do we best invest in that land? And so what we worked on with them was this 10-minute accessibility. And so really it's like the 10-minute city, but I don't like to call it city because we did it across Scotland. We worked with 7 different local authorities, and then see who has access there. In this example, basically the method we're trying to do is to tell them, okay, how many of this particular category can I either walk to or cycle to or take the bus to from any particular building in this town. Keynsham is what I'm going to show you, which is actually not in Scotland, sadly, but that's the video I had on the go. And then be able to go from 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. All of these different parameters are important to consider because each parameter allows the user to think about what their problem is. So if you're thinking more local, 5 minutes might be the appropriate distance you want to use. And if you're thinking less local, maybe you want to use 30 minutes. So the results are this little app we created where you can move around and you can be like, where are the doctors in this area? Where are the restaurants? And then see by building how many restaurants people can walk to in 750 meters. You can do this for playgrounds, as you'll see in a second. And so what we found really nice and powerful about this is that the reality is this, from a GIS perspective, is super high computation. There's a lot of routes I have to do to get this. But we have really big computers now, and we can use them, and we can allow for that to then become a really simple kind of output for people to engage with that might not necessarily be doing geospatial. Yeah, and then I wanted to put this out there is that we then took that and as a specific analysis, specifically in Scotland, we looked at Scottish towns with hills, and what we did is we inserted into our routing computation hills, because people in Scotland were like, oh, 20-minute city here doesn't apply. And so please come see that talk at the end of the month. It'll also be a 5-minute talk, but it will explain what we did there in particular. And that's it. Thank you. Hold on. There we go.
Seamless. We're good. We're good. No, thank you very much, Gala. I've seen some of the processing that goes into stuff like that before, and it seems a bit daunting. But yeah, it's nice to see that as new sort of techniques come online, and you unlock these new use cases, and it's like compute it once almost kind of open source tooling and stuff, so really cool. So our next speaker is Filippa Vigano from the Innovative Technologies Program at NatureScot. There we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, yeah, thank you very much for inviting me here this evening. So yeah, I'm the Innovative Technologies Program Manager at NatureScot, and I just want to share with you some of the work that we're doing with geospatial data, and maybe just have a quick peek into the future as well at the end. So NatureScot is Scotland's nature agency. We work with a wide range of partners across Scotland to improve our natural environment and help everyone to access nature and look after it. So that includes urban green space as well. So really interesting just to hear that example from Gala just now. In recent years, this work has included delivery of some really ambitious global targets like 30 by 30, which aims to protect 30% of the planet for nature by 2030. And also supporting a natural capital approach to land management, which really recognises the value of natural resources and healthy ecosystems and functions in decision making. So supplying the tools and the data to enable people to do that. So we have a lot of data in NatureScot, and really it is all geospatial. We heard from Bruce, everything happens somewhere, whether that's species, habitats, the management action that we make happen on protected areas, but also nothing happens in isolation. And really being able to view data spatially with other data is really valuable when we're considering whole ecosystem health and landscape scale restoration of nature. So you may be familiar with some of this data. Our protected area boundaries are key data in many land use decisions across Scotland. We also have data on the spatial distribution and extent or range of habitat and species. We need to know whether data is in good condition and whether it's getting better or worse. And so we also need to understand the pressures and threats that are acting on nature and affect biodiversity. And data helps us to monitor all of that and understand change. And then it helps us to take decisions about what action to take where. And then we need to understand the impact of those decisions. So spatial is absolutely key to all of that. And I think as well, this list of functions or applications, if you like, really shows an increasing maturity in our use of data. And this is what I wanted to share with you this evening, this journey of data maturity from just being able to show what we have. So that might be a map of protected areas in Scotland, to start to reporting on metrics, on change, to monitor change, to understand the impact of policy or actions, and finally using that data to be innovative and take new approaches to solving some of the really complex problems that we're facing. And it's really important to recognise that all of our work now is taking and our ways of working is responding to the nature and climate emergencies, which have been recognised by the Scottish Government. This goes back to Bruce's point of why now and why Scotland. We're in an emergency situation, and in an emergency you need to act differently and do different things. And so our data challenge in Nature Scot, but I think across the sector, is to understand what data we need to help us take positive action for nature and the environment, and ultimately us, in an emergency. So the first step that we took of this was a review of our data, our environmental data, so habitats and species. And I don't think these findings will be a surprise to most of you. I think they're fairly common across the sector. So data tends to be collected for projects, and then they're not easy necessarily to find and to reuse. We don't have smooth or documented flows from the capture of data to the use. And typically we've not engaged very well with external users of the data to understand their needs, and that's really important when you think we're working in partnership with people. So we're not going to, change nature for the better in Scotland on our own. We're working in partnership, so we need to understand what data other people need as well. We do have data standards, but these haven't kept pace with new technologies, and all of this limits our ability to share data. So that's me being very honest with you, that, but I got an inkling we're not the only ones. So we did ask the Data Lab to help us to run a workshop so we could understand what data people in Nature Scot wanted a data strategy to look like and how it could help them. And this gave us 5 themes for our strategy. So building the foundation is all about understanding that data need and making sure that data is flowing and getting to where it can be used. Delivering impactful outcomes is getting the most value from the data that we have, using it to take actions, tell stories and influence. Setting the industry direction reflects that everyone felt that there was a leadership role here for Nature Scot to play around data use and data sharing. And investing in people was a really strong theme as well. We need the skills so that we can use data to help us make decisions. So that came out as a really strong theme. And any change, including data, is people-driven and people-dependent. And finally, we wanted the way that we use data to create a space for innovation that allows us to transform the way that we work and innovate in the climate and nature emergencies. So now our data strategy supports our work with data and recognises that data is at the heart of how we're transforming our work, supporting work across these activities. And these types of activities, again, I think illustrate that data maturity journey that we're on and how we're becoming more mature in our use of data as we move from using data to report on what has happened, to understand why it happened, what's happening now, what could happen, and what actions need to be taken. So we're involved in a lot of exciting work, and it was hard to pick which stories to share with you. But data is key to all of these, and it involves reusing data, usually in platforms that we're developing or in work with partners, and linking it usually spatially to help people understand what's going on in a location and to make positive decisions for nature. So Innovate for Nature brings together CivTech, which is a Scottish Government tech accelerator, Nature Scot and lots of other multiple organisations to develop challenges in that climate and nature space. And through an innovation flow or tech accelerator process, tech companies then provide solutions to the challenges that have been set. And some of the innovative projects that we're involved in that have a data focus are our work with AECOM on a spatial web application to support users, mainly local authorities, to identify opportunities for nature connectivity or nature networks. We're working with Informed Solution on Informed Decision, which is a decision-making tool to support and enhance the information we provide on protected areas. So if we've been asked to provide advice or casework on a protected area, bringing together, again spatially, all the linked information that we have on that. and also with informed solution on a new digital system to underpin monitoring of the health of nature on our protected areas. And eventually that will broaden out to wider landscapes and ecosystems. Away from CivTech, other innovative projects include the complete and repeatable land cover maps that we've developed with Space Intelligence. So these use satellite data, all those satellites that Bruce showed in his talk. And these map 32 habitats across the whole country, and we have them for 3 years now, 2019, 2020 and 2022. And we're using the habitat polygons from those maps to identify which habitats are changing compared to similar habitats around them. Again, using EO data, satellite data, but this time indices derived from that data like NDVI or vegetation productivity. And so that shows us, where nature is changing, perhaps not in sync with other habitats around it. So maybe that's where we need to go and do some further work or monitoring. We're also working with Scottish Government and a company called DTime on the development of a new service called find.data.gov.scot that helps anyone to find data using simple search terms and provides information to data providers on what people are searching for, and so there hopefully we can provide the data that they need. This screenshot is from a new tool that NatureScot is leading on the development of that will help landowners and managers to take that natural capital approach that I mentioned at the beginning. So it uses heat maps based on habitat data and other environmental data like species to identify areas of demand for investment in natural capital. And then it suggests ways of uplifting and improving natural capital in those areas. And we're working on that with John Moores University. So all of these tools are underpinned by data. None of them are going to work unless we've got really good data to use. So it's really important that we understand what data we need and the value that these tools are adding so that we can invest in the data. Just really quickly, and I know I've gone over time. So this is a map of the areas that could contribute to 30 by 30, that global target I mentioned at the beginning, and that's going to be the basis of a new tool to look at selecting or identifying new sites for nature. And if you want to hear more about that, go along to Fairley and Lydia's talk, which is on the list of the Fringe events. So I promise really quickly a look at the future, thanks to one of our AI image generators for these. I think the future of data collection will definitely use data from satellites, and there'll be an increasing range of sensors. So not just the images that we're used to, but lots of other sensors as well. It will also include in situ sensors on site, which can monitor things like water content, carbon. And I think being able to link those points of data with satellite data over larger areas is going to be really important. But it will also really importantly involve people to make sense of all that data and to use it to tell stories, inspire change and support action. And this might be what the future office of NatureScot looks like, or we might all be working from home, I don't know. But I think we will be monitoring change in nature and our landscapes and understanding the pressures and threats and using data to do that, to adapt the management and monitoring effectiveness. We'll be working more collaboratively with a wider range of stakeholders across the country, and we'll be sharing data, testing out ideas before using data to support our decisions. And we'll use that data to tell stories, inspire more positive action for nature. And thank you very much. I'm sorry that was Thanks, Deborah.
Really interesting talk, and again, another great run through of some brilliant use cases out in the public domain. Can confirm that from the consulting work we do, absolutely everyone has the same challenges around data quality standards, talent, and so on and so forth. Last talk of the night before the panel discussion, I'd like to welcome up to the front Abigail Page, who I think's at the back, there we go, Head of International Communications Engagement for the Geospatial Commission. A round of applause if you will, please.
Find it. Hang on.
Oops.
Oh.
You can give it again, Abigail.
Oh. I won't do it justice. You know, I was just thinking, this is a geospatial fringe, right? We should have some interactivity, like, should we not? So I was just sitting at the back and thinking, I've not heard this yet in the presentations, but does anybody know what the first law of geography is? Not Bruce. Anyone else? No, thank you. So the first law of geography is that everything's related to everything else, but near things are related to, more related than those that are distant. And I was just kind of reflecting this morning on, you know, I've spoken about the value of geospatial in many different places in the UK and internationally, but being able to connect in Scotland at home to talk about this, I just think it's a really great opportunity. So thank you for the Data Lab, and what an amazing opportunity to have the Fringe running during August. So the presentation's a blend of personal and day job. Possibly I've tried to do too much in 7 minutes. I'll move quite quickly, and I'm around for conversations later. Thank you. Probably was a height issue on the live stream, was it? So I would like to say I've always been a geographer, but it's not true, and it's just basically an excuse for a photo of my daughter, because that's not me. You know, I didn't really get geography at school beyond kind of Duke of Edinburgh and going out with some maps. I didn't really connect with it kind of early on, and I've fallen into geospatial later through a computer science background. And now I've been a confessed geo geek for a number of years, probably 20 odd years. So that's included things like dragging colleagues to see globe exhibitions at different events, making some really horrible blue and green cakes for GIS Day, truly quite disgusting, going around work with a blue mouth. And also finding ways to attend amazing events like the UN Geospatial World Congress in China in 2018. That's me doing the VR. So always kind of like diving in, trying to kind of maximize experience. And like what's kind of happened, I guess, between that disconnect and where I am now, I guess I've moved through a number of roles in cartography, as an analyst, in consultancy and product design, and sort of started to build that kind of awareness of the real value that geospatial data has. I guess like Bruce, someone who's very enthusiastic about it, and starting to see, I guess, during that career, and then that move into policy when I joined the Geospatial Commission in 2019. So that leads me on to talking a little bit about the Commission. So we are a unit that was set up in government in 2018 to further the opportunities realised by geospatial data. We're based in the Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, so that's an economic policy and delivery department in government. And it's also home to really lots of other exciting developments in tech and AI and tech policy and digital government. So it's a really great place to have geospatial recognised in central government, a very different place to be than when I started in geospatial 20 odd years ago, to have that recognition in central government and the investment and the importance of geospatial. Yeah, sunglasses on for the corporate slide that's now been issued from the department. So this is our focus as a department in DSIT. We have 3 kind of key areas of focus: accelerating innovation, tech for good, and mission modern digital government. And those supporting or enabling the 5 national missions that government have. I think you'll agree that geospatial has a really important role across all of those areas, and we've already seen some of that in the presentations tonight. Aware of time, I just wanted to share a couple of areas of work that I thought were most interesting from colleagues and from the office. If colleagues are watching on the live stream, I'm not picking favorites. I just have only a few minutes. So one of these is ensuring that the UK's public sector have access to really high quality geospatial data. So colleagues like Nature Scott, we're now kind of got like over 6,000 bodies in the UK accessing geospatial data. It means that ambulances can get to you. It means that your bins get collected. It means that we have really informed geospatial decision making in government. And also this agreement, the PSG agreement, supports a lot of work around R&D, UK geospatial standards, and international representation. So I've got 2 colleagues from my team currently on another live stream from the UN in New York, making some interventions on behalf of the UK at the UN body of experts, which is just a really exciting place again for geospatial to be recognised. Yeah, Philip mentioned about AI, and I think it's really interesting thinking about this kind of high quality data, and it's been a kind of foundation in the public sector for a while. Usage has kind of grown over a number of years. But thinking about moving forward, there's that phrase like garbage in, garbage out. And AI learns from the data that you give it. It needs to be taught. It feels like it's never been more important to get this data right and get the quality of data we're providing for tech innovation as a strong foundation, and it's something that we think about quite a lot in the Commission. And that leads me to talking about keeping ahead. So as Bruce says, we're really good at this stuff in the UK and in Scotland, but we've got to keep going. We've got to keep moving, and innovation is really transforming geospatial. We've already heard sensor tech, cloud tech, AI. There's a lot of things that are happening that are impacting across the geospatial value chain to how we collect data, how we use it, and how we surface it for others. A last example, colleagues are also looking at kind of commercial data sets. So what's happening in the market, what data is kind of emerging around geospatial data, how are the markets developing, how can they support the UK, and what can government do to support them to be adopted? One example of a program that we're looking at is population movement data. So that's data that's captured from phones, cards, sensors, aggregated and anonymized, but we saw it used quite a lot during COVID. We're thinking about how that can be used further by the public sector and other areas of society. And we're just really at the early stages of thinking about how we unlock value from data like this. Okay, to close, I'm going to go back to the personal. So I'm really excited about the Fringe, all the great conversations and the connections we're going to have. I just had a few thoughts about it. So one is share the wow. I think we're all doing some amazing stuff in Scotland around the use of geospatial data. We don't talk about it enough, and we don't really kind of inspire people maybe outside of our own community sometimes to think about it. So it's amazing to see some of these examples, and we should be talking about it more. The second one, celebrate the people making the weird cakes, right? Because there's a lot of technology advances coming. We need some really strong, capable leaders, and Scotland is very well placed to help us on that journey as we go forward. And the third point, maybe this will come up a little bit in the panel as well, but we don't just need geospatial experts. I work with economists, analysts, finance experts, people that make super business cases to government about investment. This is really about multidisciplinary approaches. And also, bringing other voices to the table and making sure we're taking a kind of broad and wide approach as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just a great example of how data sets like this, you're just one step away and you end up in a place where hundreds of services built on the back of it really rely on these kind of expertise and these use cases to enable things that don't immediately come to mind. So we're going to move into the panel discussion and won't cut it short. So we'll probably go on till about 25 past. After about 15-20 minutes, I'll open up the floor for questions. So please get them ready. But if I could welcome all our speakers back to the stage. So I've been told I need to sit in the corner because I'm too distracting when I wander about. So
I think I'm too small for this.
do you want a leg up?
Wasn't carrying all this stuff. Here.
Can you okay? Do you want another seat?
Yeah.
Oh, we're in.
Got it?
Thank you.
I give you your stuff, Simon. Very good.
So just while we get set up, I've run a few of these, and never have I ever had a panel so engaged over email, talking about all the different things we could talk about in a panel discussion. So if we don't get to all of the points, apologies, but it was a really lively warm up. So yeah, I'll just open with a general one, I think, around one thing I like to ask all these panels. If you were in the audience tonight, maybe you're like coming to the end of your undergrad or your PhD, and you've heard something that's really inspired you, and you think, right, I want to do that in the next 3 or 4 years. Have you got advice for people entering into the market, looking for these kinds of jobs? What should they be? What projects should they be looking at? Where should they go? What should they engage with to really accelerate their journey to there?
Microphone, so I'll say something. I think go with it. I think there's no wrong decisions. I think it's so fast moving that you will evolve naturally with the projects and the ideas. Speak to as many people as you possibly can. I'm still learning a huge amount in this area, and it's fascinating coming to an event like this, hearing what's going on, what colleagues are doing, and it is really, really fast moving. So yeah, talk to as many people as you can, go for it, enjoy it, would be my advice.
So I think my advice would be to learn how to tell stories. So whatever you do, you can really tell people about, because that's really important if you are trying to get a job. If we get down to the the sort of brass tacks of it, I guess. It's funny, we were having a conversation just outside, and we were saying that it would be really hard, I think, to sort of nail down what are the skills of a geospatial professional, because it's such a broad field. It goes all the way from programming to understanding, in my field, habitats and species data, but in lots of other fields, other specialist data. So I don't think there's a set of skills that is definitely, that makes you a geospatial professional. But I think, being able to understand what we've been talking about tonight, the importance of location, the importance of where, the importance of building that picture, using lots of different data to understand what's going on somewhere, and then being able to communicate that and tell a story, and understanding the problem that you're trying to solve, because this is all about solving problems. That's what we do. We just do it in lots of different ways, and we do it with lots of different partners as well. So that would be my advice.
I have 2 thoughts. The first one is that sometimes we don't say it in the geospatial community, but actually the curve to entering in geospatial is like really steep at the beginning, and then it really flattens into a more comfortable space. I remember I ended up in geospatial by mistake, but I remember like literally sitting in front of my computer being like, oh, projections, like the world's not flat. I cannot just do Cartesian coordinate stuff. And this sounds so silly, but it's not. It's the kind of stuff that you are just doing stuff thinking, okay, well, I know how to get the distance between 2 points. And then actually there's 100 ways to get the distance between 2 points. And you have to now pick one. And I think don't undermine how dense the beginning is when you're learning all about coordinate systems I'm still learning about, and that once you get through that hump and you feel a little bit more confident, it does get like a lot more comfortable. And so I think it's really, there's so many parts. Also, geospatial can require a lot of computational knowledge, because some of the algorithms are actually really heavy in the computation side. So you think you're just doing this simple thing, and next thing your computer tells you is going to be 7 hours. And this is very normal kind of stuff. And I think I wasn't prepared for that. I just kind of thought, what the hell, I've done something wrong. So I just really encourage people about that. And then the other thing is, you don't have to be the expert on everything. As we've said, like geospatial hits on so many different things. If you try and be the expert on everything, you'll just sound like a fool. I think it's much better to like find collaboration or find experts to input into your work, because it is about, like working with Nature Scott. I don't want to be an ecologist. That's not what I do. But I have to be able to engage with the ecologist. Otherwise, like my work is not as meaningful. So I think that's very important.
Just a couple of thoughts. I think one, rules might not say geospatial on the tin, and I think quite a few people maybe fall into the trap of searching for geospatial roles, and there's a lot of roles that need geospatial skills, but more than that, I think geospatial thinking and that geographical thinking and that understanding that actually knowing where something is or where things happen is a really strong kind of mindset to help you realize connections and look for patterns. And there's a lot of I've run into a lot of people in government that are doing geospatial roles and geospatial analysis, but doesn't say geospatial on their job title and doesn't say it on the tin. So dig a little bit deeper, think about areas where your skills could be applied to different things. And also there's a lot of organizations that still maybe don't know that they need some geospatial expertise. And there's a lot of maybe third sector organizations, environmental organizations that could do with somebody running a project for them or getting a bit of experience over the summer internship and, reach out and spot those opportunities and make things happen for yourself, I think.
I think some great points and some really good insight from people in the space. I think you touched on it, it's come across in the talks especially, and it was sort of touched on there, but so I think like all data and AI techies get really excited about their bit, but there's something like as a next level to it with geospatial people. What is it that's like extra exciting about geospatial? Why do the people, in my experience, that are in it love it as much as they do? Like why geospatial? Why are you in it?
I think it's that ability to form the connections and the link around place, and I think it's like why do people use a mobile phone? Like geospatial is now just part of our everyday world, and the more you look for things, the more you can see the geospatial connections, and the more you jump into people from other disciplines. And have you thought about this? And you can really bring so much value to what people are looking at. I also just think it's a really cool community. Like I've just met some really, really great people. I say it's very kind of friendly in Scotland. It's very easy to get involved in things. People are welcoming. You get some great visuals to help you along the way and things to inspire. And yeah, it's just a really, really exciting time, as I think was mentioned.
I would say I'm a geographer by trade, so I think GIS was a sort of natural space for me to go into. But I think for me, it is as basic as just really liking maps. And I don't just mean, the paper maps or the OS maps that, probably your grannies have now. I don't know if, they're probably a bit old hat, aren't they? But maps on computers as well. I think we, in my job, in my experience, if you put a map in front of somebody, something clicks. And they get it and they can see things and you can begin to pull out those relationships. And so I just think maps are quite cool, actually.
I think maps are really cool. I love paper maps because actually I spend a lot of time staring at screens, so spreading a paper map out is just wonderful. I think the other point, I agree with all the points that have been made. I'm a geographer. I'm a geographer to my core, and geography has just got so many problems. And I have interesting discussions sometimes with some of my computer science colleagues. And computer science seems to be a whole lot of solutions looking for problems, whereas geography is a whole lot of problems looking for solutions. And that's the space I want to be in, actually making, as Abby said, the connections between the two. I think that's just such good fun.
That's hard to follow. It was really pithy. I actually came into geospatial from a network side, so from a mathematics side, where the concept of a graph is nodes and edges that have information, and I came from that kind of analysis, and then it ended up being that your nodes and your edges actually are located somewhere because they were a fiber optic network. That's how I ended up in the space. Then for me, it was really the mathematics. Like in geospatial, you can find so many different levels of math. You can get, you can, as I said, like the world can be round, the world can be not round, the world can be flat. You can turn from one to the other. So that makes stuff really cool. But also you can traverse the graph just like you can traverse the city. And so for me, that is a whole area of mathematics that I studied. So for me, that really just... I think that's what makes people click, is that you can get really deep and really niche and you can keep going. And that's hard to do in lots of industries. Like sometimes you reach the boundary of your knowledge. Like that's it. That's kind of, that's all you need to know. But in geospatial, I feel like the more you know about networks, the more you can know about networks, the more you can do, the more, and then it's like never ending kind of obsession.
See what I mean about the passion? I love it. It's brilliant. So we hinted at some of this again, and I think I mentioned it. But is there a reason, like, why is now a special time in this domain in geospatial? And do we think like any of the new technologies or innovations that we're seeing out in the wild are getting us to like a new inflection point in the space?
I would say I think the climate emergency is just like so obvious. Why geospatial? Because so much, I mean, even the whole area of Earth observation is gonna be like, it can help us or it can sink us. And so I think for me, you know, there's all these people spending all their time like, how do I draw, you know, a bunch of people with a thing like blah, 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 yeah, but what about the climate crisis? And how do we solve it? And what about looking at all this other stuff? So not to undermine some stuff, but I think the climate crisis is the reason to be in geospatial right now and why it's pivotal.
I mean, I would support that, definitely, being from Nature Scott. So, yeah, I mean, the climate and nature emergency, let's not forget, you know, biodiversity has fallen off a cliff edge since, you know, probably the 1970s. So it's a joint emergency, and yeah, we can't tackle it without understanding what's going on in a space, the pressures, and threats that are affecting nature in that space. The climate emergency, of course, is wider, it's global, but some of the solutions, the mitigations and the adaptations to that emergency take place at a local level. So we need to understand where our actions are going to have the most impact, whether that's to reduce flooding downstream, to protect coastlines, you know, where is action to restore nature going to have the most impact? And you know, that's one side of the coin. There's the other human side of the coin as well. None of this can happen in isolation. It has to happen with willing partners on the ground. So that again is spatial. You know, where are the communities that want to get involved in this? Where are the landowners who want to get involved in this? You know, something, Scotland has a lot of peatland. We know peatland is a really important store of carbon. Healthy peatland can actually absorb carbon from the atmosphere. Unhealthy peatland is an emitter. And at the moment, you know, land is a big emitter of carbon in Scotland. So we want, you know, restore that peatland to healthy peatland so that it's actually drawing down carbon from the atmosphere. To do that, we need to know where it is, how to get to it, you know, what restoration techniques are going to work on different types of peatland, different topographies, different altitudes, different aspects and steepness of slope. So, yeah, there's no bit of the tackling the nature and climate emergency that doesn't involve geospatial data, so really important.
Slightly different angle. So we ran an Earth observation pilot with public sector bodies, just concluded. We're kind of pulling together the results. And I guess that was something that we've been thinking about as well. Like, Earth observation data isn't new, and the public sector in some domains have been using it for a while, particularly like environment. But what's changing is the availability and the kind of competition perhaps in the market around availability of kind of commercial Earth observation data sets at like higher resolution. Why is that happening? It's kind of easier to send stuff up into space. It's cheaper. The costs are like kind of coming down in terms of the barriers. New technologies like enabling different types of sensors to go up. So we're also getting infrared, thermal, the organizations themselves are becoming more switched on to the type of problems that we just heard about, and that they need geospatial data to help them. So there's a kind of supply growth. There's also demand growth. There's definitely still challenges about the capabilities needed to bring those two things together, a problem and a data supply. But we're also seeing the kind of technology development in the middle as well. So I guess when you've got a capability gap, you can skill people up to use more complex data, or you can also use technology to help you interpret that data and provide products to people that are easier to use, and they don't need there's like masters and years of research. You know, you actually can provide that to policymakers in a way that's accessible and usable. So I think we're seeing a lot of change in a lot of different things all happening at the same time, and that makes some real kind of opportunity spaces for geospatial opening up.
I completely agree with you. I've been in this business quite a while, and the technology never ceases to amaze me. When I started in this business, the power that's now in my mobile phone, we were running labs for entire students, and we'd think nothing of a task that's relatively simple these days, taking 24 hours. So we've got the technology, we've got the data. But I think more than anything, while not disagreeing with the climate emergency, of course, we live in such a connected world. We've never lived in a more connected world. And what we do in one place has an effect on what happens somewhere else. And it's impossible to understand, to model, to look for ways forward without understanding the where and the data that Abby and other colleagues have talked about. So it's that interconnectivity. As I say, I'm still learning, and I've been enormously lucky. I've been through the whole web revolution was fantastic. Suddenly you could read other people's data at the other side of the world. Then we could put maps on the web. Wow! And then Google came along. Wow! And it's still like that for me. There's still so many new innovations. I'm really excited. For example, everybody talks about AI. But I'm really excited about being able to sit down in a system that you don't have to move the mouse and type commands and load in data sets and all that sort of stuff that we're rather familiar with. You can just say, okay, tell me where the best place to put a new store is. Tell me where the best place to put a new sports centre is. And the AI will understand the data, will understand the problem. That's still a way off, but it's going to come. And I'm really excited to see it and perhaps be a small part of it happening.
Very cool. So, I mean, yeah, being a part of that happening and sort of contributing to it. Bruce mentioned in his talk that he thinks that like the UK is at the forefront and actually led by Scotland. Is that sort of opinion held by the rest of the panel? And if so, like, what are we doing that's so special up here, and how do we continue to build on these successes that we're having?
I've got to be careful what I say, haven't I?
You're being recorded.
They're not really watching, are they? Having started off my career in Scotland, I think what we're really great at is the point I talked about community and actually making things happen. In Whitehall, for say, there's a lot of different departments and a lot of different people, and it's quite challenging to get everybody in a room. That's pretty easy in Scotland if you want to have a discussion about public sector data, local authority data. If you want to kind of find somebody who's doing something, you can usually find a connection through the network to find that person and make things happen. And we've definitely seen a lot of pilots that have happened in Scotland that have then been rolled out to kind of UK-wide programmes and projects. So from a public sector perspective, things like Scotland's green space map that was kind of then rolled out and adopted by the Ordnance Survey into their product spec. These kind of things are piloted here. And there's something about the size of community that's broad enough and wide enough and welcoming to new ideas to bring in the innovation, but small enough to be able to connect up and really make things happen.
I would definitely agree with that, Abby. I think that's a real strength in Scotland. I think from an environmental point of view as well, I think especially now, but for a number of years, I think the environment has just been so important in Scotland, not just from, a Nature Scot point of view and protected areas and that kind of thing, but it underpins so many people's livelihoods in Scotland, from fishing and crofting and farming, forestry, whiskey, that's important. The natural environment is part of that as well. I think it's important from that aspect. It's also obviously, lots of people come to Scotland to see the natural environment. So we've kind of got willing partners to work with in that space as well. And I think that's really important too.
I have nothing to add to the eloquence of my colleagues. I completely agree.
I mean, yeah, I think lots is happening in Scotland, but I wouldn't necessarily say Scotland is like the main place. I think there's a lot of gaps in geospatial in the Scotland ecosystem. Like there's not that many grassroots activity happening. I think a lot of the activity that is happening is like a more established corporate kind of direction is what I see. Like there's a lot of money being fueled in. Like CivTech is a great example. A lot of the CivTech challenges have been location-based, so I think that always helps. But for example, like I'm looking at some of the stuff coming out of Latin America where there is no money and people are doing it like grassroots, like citizen data science, and like we haven't got that. And like that's okay, but I think like there's some really cool stuff happening. I think the nature stuff is huge. I also, from an urban planning side, which is where I work, I have to say that the Scottish government has placed a lot of emphasis. Everybody now, every single local authority in their local plan has to address the 20-minute city. They have basically passed it as a thing you have to have. This means lots of geospatial innovation into helping all the local councils deliver that, because it is not easy to evaluate how you're doing in that kind of space. So I think that there's that. There's also just amazing education around the geographic. There's a huge Earth observation community here, is what I have seen. And if you go to any of the tech spaces, you will find lots of different companies doing like really cool niche stuff in the space. So I think there's that, but maybe as a newbie, I have to say, I have found the community welcoming to a degree and very unwelcoming to another degree. Is also just super homogeneous, which I've found really difficult. So I think if we address those issues, I think that kind of like more grassroots stuff and diversifying of our community, I think we will see this like super upcoming innovation space. But, you know, I don't want to be tagged as a negative one. I've seen very positive stuff, obviously being here myself, but I do think there's space to grow.
No, very good to get the contrast of views and as well. But I think, like, just before I open up to the floor and ask a few other questions, that'd be interesting to riff on that diversity of teams and the kind of the multidisciplinary nature. Have you got any like great stories of outcomes from where you've seen the diversity piece actually play a real success in the outcome of a project that you could tell us about?
Here?
Or just at all, yeah, in the geospatial space. And
yeah, I think one of the coolest projects I've seen is it's like a feminist group coming. It's actually like they're called Geo-Latinas, and one of the things I have done across different cities is map how many streets are named after men or after women. And you can see, and it's called Mapa de las Mujeres, which means the map of women. And obviously you should see the different cities, and this is, for language reasons, a lot easier to do in Spanish than it is in other languages, where names tend to be a lot more kind of binary gender denoted. But one of the things that has done is it's taken like a group of all of these people who didn't think themselves necessarily very technical or established geospatial people, and because they've done all these different cities and stuff, it has really given them light, and it has really like brought them up to the center stage, and now they get like conference speaking and stuff. And to me, that's like such a cool project of something that meant something to them, because it does suck. Like I come from Mexico City, walking around, and it's like dude everywhere around you, and you know all these amazing women whose streets could also be named after, but nobody bothered. And so for me, that's a really cool project of how you can take people and like lift them, how like a community can take people who are usually like completely like not highlighted and pull them up and say, hey, geospatial is a place for you. And I have found that to be a super cool project, and really recommend you looking them up as they expand their kind of operation and into different projects.
Philippa?
Well, I don't, unfortunately, I don't think I do have an example of a really good project, but, I think Nature Scott is keen to reach out. We do work in, in urban green spaces as well as, the sort of, more wild parts of Scotland. So, we do want to reach out, and CivTech is a way of us doing that. We're presenting our problems, our challenges to the community, to the crowd, to sort of solve. You did mention sort of citizen scientist and citizen data there as well. And so just to say that is a really important source of data for us, particularly for species records. Lots of species records are collected by individuals or people who are part of recording societies for all sorts of different sort of species across Scotland. So that we couldn't work without that data. Could that whole community be more diverse? Absolutely, and it would be great to see that develop in the future.
Maybe just give a brief shout out for OpenStreetMaps, which everybody is well aware of. But I think I was a bit cynical, I have to admit, about OpenStreetMaps when it started off for all manner of technical reasons and so on. But I think they've really proven that they get the geospatial out there. And there's so many spin-off projects that have helped in aid and third world and global south and so on. So I think it's been a real success, and I think it's also been a success in terms of bringing the likes of Ordnance Survey into the 21st century and saying, right, okay, data has to be more accessible, and so yeah, they've got to get credit for that.
I think we can always do more. I think what's great is that we're now asking some of these questions that maybe we weren't before. I haven't heard mentioned this evening either. The Women in Geospatial Network, they did a really great mentoring program. If people are interested, that's a good one to look at. As government departments, we're obviously expected to make sure we outreach, and we do, and it isn't just a tick box. But for example, for our UK geospatial strategy, ran different focus groups, including with kind of undergraduates and maybe areas that we probably, you're not going to expect somebody to spend their weekend kind of writing a response to a consultation. So making sure we're going out and gathering that in. But, we need to do more, and we need to make sure we're asking these questions about representation. It's, really important.
So, your turn. I'm going to open it up to the crowd. Does anyone here have any questions for, here we go. Please, that's just for the people at home, so please project for the rest of the room.
Okay, yeah, my daughter just got higher results. She got an A in geography, A's and B's in physics, biology, maths as well. So I downloaded QGIS onto her computer today. How do I get her into geospatial from there?
I don't. So reflecting back, I guess, again on my early geography experience, I hope it's very different in schools now. But I think until I saw the applied examples of how it could be powerful and how I could contribute to something with that work, it was pretty challenging. So maybe you need to start at the problem end. I don't know, maybe it'd be super cool to look at street names of women in Edinburgh, or maybe there's a problem space where you then gently introduce the tools. I don't know, interesting one. Is she interested in taking the geography further, I guess, is the first question. But.
At that age, it's trying to get information out of them.
I think you hit an interesting point. I don't think we do terribly well at that level of education, and I don't think most school kids, indeed school teachers, and indeed careers advisors would know what geospatial is and that there are interesting careers there. So it's something that we're, through AGI and Location Data Scotland, trying to address, to look at that. And I think also there's, and maybe you've slightly fallen into that trap of school teachers tend to think, oh, we've got to download a GIS system, QGIS or whatever, and that's where our starting point is. And I'm not sure that is where the starting point is. I think it's about thinking geographically, thinking spatially, and you can easily put somebody off by dumping a piece of software on them. So it's as Abby said, it's the applications, it's the problems. How do we solve these problems? But you're absolutely right. I think we need to do an awful lot more in schools to educate teachers, parents, pupils, and careers teachers that there is an interesting area out there called geospatial that they can make their careers in.
Can I add? There's also now really amazing software that's not as heavy duty as QGIS. For example, Felt is literally you can plan your garden, but you draw it, and then all of a sudden it tells you the dimensions, and it's like on a map, and it's like next thing you can map other you can be as niche as like, hey, let's go, you and I, and you do gardening, and then like let's plot out where the apples are gonna go. Or clearly I don't do gardening. Apples is a tree, but like the tomatoes are gonna go, and this and that. I just honestly, as an ex-high school teacher, is like think about something she likes, come up with a project with her, and then you add the geospatial to it and kind of show her like, this is simple, like we're just planting plants in the backyard, but actually there's entire technical components we can add. I think that's the way to push it. But also maybe as a parent as well, it's like sometimes the more we push, the less they take. So maybe sometimes back away and let her do her thing.
From hiring people as well, like my experience in just projects makes such a difference for like, you can see people that really love it and live it and breathe it. Do we have any good questions from the audience at home yet? No, anyone in the back of the room? Got any good questions for me? Over here, yes. Project nice and loud into the mic for me, please.
I'm really interested to hear more about the storytelling component, about how you take this data, especially when it's being translated and communicated to the public who might not be as familiar with reading maps or even using maps maybe outside of Google Maps or some of the other more familiar ones, and kind of how the public comes into play with kind of advocating and supporting some of the data that comes out of geospatial.
But that's a great question. And I just really want to say, I think almost Google Maps has tainted us a bit into having, like when we think of a map, we think of Google Maps. And that's so terrible because there are so many different ways to map data and understand data. And I think that's like a key component when we're working with kind of outside is that the maps we had a great talk at the last GeoMob about like perspective, and it was like a coordinate system from like when you're sitting in the train and like what you see, like that is exactly what I mean is a map can be what you think of, in urban planning. A lot of what we do is we tell people like, okay, go and tell me how your route to home looks. And they're not gonna tell you, exactly, they're not gonna draw it. At least back in the day, they definitely didn't used to draw it, but like Google Maps, but now they do. Then I think kind of stepping away from map as a Google map and thinking about a map as a concept of understanding. And I think if we start there and then we add the geolocation in some manner, I think that's a really nice way to kind of twist it and really enter mapping from a more creative side too.
There's a wonderful piece of software called Story Maps that comes from the same stable as ArcGIS that you may have heard of, which is one of the big systems. And we use it with our undergraduates, and it's literally telling a story. What is the problem you're trying to solve, and then animating that problem effectively through pictures and maps. But rather than I love maps, and I don't have a problem sometimes with maps being at the absolute center of what happens. In fact, sometimes that doesn't happen enough. But it's also possible to tell the story and integrate the map into that story and use the map in an interactive way. So I think there are tools, there are ways of doing that. And yeah, it's really important. Sometimes I think was said before, the map is an eye opener for communities, for groups, for individuals, and just bring a completely new perspective to things. But sometimes it's a bit radical. If you're not a geographer, if you're not used to looking at maps, this sort of map thing is a bit weird, and people don't necessarily know how to interpret it. So having a way of telling a story that may bring in maps, so actually it might not involve maps at all. It might just be statistics and information derived from geospatial data. So I think we've got to look in the round, and sometimes, yeah, my students probably do focus too much on maps. Sometimes very bad maps, I have to say. None of them are in the room, so I can say this. But cartography, producing good maps is a real skill. It involves art and science. You've got to be an artist as well as putting the technical components in, and sometimes it is done terribly badly. So if there are other ways of doing it that connect better with the community, that's great. I've seen some wonderful examples too. Colleagues up in James Hutton in Aberdeen have one of these virtual reality theatres that they take out, a collapsible one they take out to communities to show environmental issues and projects, and whether it be wind farms or peatland restoration, and they can connect much more easily as a 3D VR experience than putting down a paper map or just giving some kind of tedious lecture. So that's another great thing that I really get excited about with geospatial. There's so many different ways of portraying the answers to the problems. And if one doesn't work, try another one.
Like my brain just goes onto rabbit holes around geospatial conversations, but I think that one on cartography is a really good one. There's some good toolkits online for decent cartography. I think British Cartographic Society, for example, have a toolkit. People spent a long time thinking about cartography, what works. I remember one of my early roles when the manager's been like, well, I can't really use maps because I'm colorblind. Well, actually, that's a problem that can be solved, right? So that's bad maps. I think if you search bad maps, you get some interesting results on Google as well. But I think like historically, maps were maps kind of convey a sense of trust. Like when people see a picture of something, like more than written material, they kind of buy into it, and that's really powerful. But then we've also got to think about critical thinking. And all those conversations we were having around new tech, AI, what's the data being used, like what's the underlying data that's driving that output, and raising, I guess, our next generation of geographers with that critical thinking. Maps have always been used to portray political points, like the whole term like gerrymandering and adjusting boundaries and all of these things. So it's a really interesting topic of discussion. It's a really good one.
Think about your audience, because not everybody is comfortable with a map or with certain types of maps, and you can simplify maps a lot. You can take away a lot of the mappy elements that might confuse some audiences. So really thinking about your audience is really important. But I think from in my work, when we're trying to bring together lots of different stakeholders and collaborate and engage in a space and in what might happen in that space, being able to see different interests on a map often, opens up opportunities and conversations that I don't think you would get to without a map. But spatial data doesn't just have to be maps. Photographs of change over time can be really powerful as well, and they are spatial because they've been taken somewhere and they're showing change in a landscape or whatever. So.
Any more time? One more question. Someone over here. There we go. Final question. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for an interesting presentation. Name's Richard Miller, 6G Cam, and I'm here because I'm really interested in data and AI meeting up. What does the panel think about the creation of digital twins, and are academia and government working together to achieve that, and then engaging with basically business and industry, because it'll only work if we all work together?
Looking at me. So I think digital twins are like really interesting. It's super compelling thinking about that life cycle of data capture from, for example, the development of a building and thinking, well, this is a building we're going to have to maintain for the next 30, 50 years. Let's capture everything we need at the start and bring that in as part of the life cycle. There's a lot in government that's happened around thinking about digital twins. It's not something I'm probably the most articulate on. It's not something I've spent a lot of time on. But this is all about the quality of data and then what it enables downstream. I think it's a growth area as well, and I guess we're starting to see at one point, which was very kind of niche applications of different types of geospatial technology and BIM digital twins being kind of maybe constrained to construction, starting to have that kind of more wider appeal and growth. And it's an exciting area to keep an eye on. I'd be happy to have a chat about it afterwards when I've had a bit of a deeper think. But
For the natural environment, these are really complex systems, and they sound really useful. I'm not an expert. They sound really useful. I would question whether we had the data needed to support them at the moment, but we should absolutely be thinking about collecting that data and making sure that, you know, it's suitable for these uses for AI and for digital twins. So, you know, we need to think about that now for the data that we're capturing from this point going forward. But I think as well, you know, you need to build in there some sort of checking by humans as well, so you don't just get carried away with what the projection's telling you. So I think it's important always to come back to that sense checking. So data and humans have to be part of it too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think digital twins, even like, what's your definition? Is maybe like what I would say in like, if I had a client meeting, I'd be like, what do you mean by digital twin? Because I think like, as a technical person, what I think of a digital twin is probably not what the average person is thinking in digital twin. And so if what you're thinking is like the highly technical, which means you like straight up you want to know, you want to model exactly everything that's happening every time at all times, then what I would say to you is kind of like, do you really need to do that? Like, can you just take a step back and like chill out? Like, actually, we do not need to know everything about everything all the time. Especially like, I mean, I come from a city side, so that's what I think of when I think digital twin. I do think there's a lot happening. Like there's like, if you're interested, there's a group that meets, I think, every month, and they talk about digital twin, and it's a bunch of companies that have digital twins or are involved in the digital twin ecosystem that are meeting every month and discussing and talking about and blah, 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 and government agencies are involved in that. So there's obviously this. There's also the National Underground Map Noir or something that's like recently came out. Yeah, and like obviously that's really going to take up, because now it's not just like digital twins up here, but it's like digital twin down there, which I think is super needed for a lot, like nature side, but also kind of from transitioning into greener electricity kind of stuff. So I think what I would say about digital twins is like, I think they're overhyped. I think they're a fun technical problem, but that does not mean it is one we have to expend all of our money addressing. But I also think that from the other side, there are places where they are well suited. I think that tends to be smaller. So it's like maybe a digital twin of a building is a lot more useful than a digital twin, for example, of an entire city. So, but I think, you know, there's digital twins and then there's digital twins. So I think that's one thing. And then the other thing I always think about when we discuss decisions being made by AI is that the reality is when these decisions affect people, which in the sense of a city they do, we have to consider that if there is no space for then people to intervene and have a say, which a digital twin obviously makes so hard because it's so data heavy and like it just removes so much, sometimes the gains can be really catastrophic as well. So I think we need to evaluate the gains versus the cost, and the cost to who, because the reality is a lot of times the cost to who is to the people that for the cost is so heavy, right? So I think those are the things to think about. Me, myself, you know, our engine that we use, people love to simplify it, calling it a digital twin, and I get like inside, I get like palpitations. So, you know, I think moving towards a digital twin feels a bit like Gattaca. Like we don't have to do that. We can be more human about it. Data can be data and also just be human. That's what I would say about that.
I'll start off by saying I'm no expert in digital twins, and I'm in two minds. I kind of agree with Galen that I think they're a little bit overhyped. The real world is infinitely complicated, and I think there is this sort of tendency to think we can build a true twin, and as you say, might work for a building, not going to work for a city. But what I do like about digital twins is that they make us think about rigor. Through my career in GI, I've seen so many examples of, the plans have gone missing, or the person's left the organisation. So that memory of why things were done has gone. So I think a digital twin does give us that ability to be more rigorous. We've had Avi will remember this, years of discussions about metadata in GI. That, oh no, it's not just about recording the data, we've got to record about the data, why we collected the data, and nobody collects it because it's really boring. You just want to get the project out, and digital twins are kind of the same in that sense, but I think I like the idea that there is that rigor, because it's terribly unfortunate when the institutional memory is lost. Why did we create that play street where it is? Why is that community being designed the way it was? We need to remember that, and often that's forgotten, especially in a digital world. I think that the amount of data I've seen lost through my career, as well as the amount of data I've seen gained, are probably about equal. Actually, people leave, data's deleted, machines are thrown in a skip. You used to be able to write papers about old colleagues because you had their papers. That doesn't exist anymore. Their data is gone. Their emails, who would read their emails? So I think retaining that corporate memory in terms of why decisions were taken in a spatial world is important. That's where I see digital twins as perhaps giving us something that's a little bit more rigorous.
Well, all I'd like to say is thank you very much to our speakers for a really brilliant set of talks and a wonderful panel discussion tonight. So if we can get a round of applause for each of the 4 speakers. Thank you. I'm well aware that we're over. A few last bits to do. We'll just community shout outs if anyone wants to do them. This is again a space where we're going to take a few minutes, just if you want to give a colleague some kudos, or you've got an event that you want to promote, now's your shot. Really, really short, 30 seconds. I'm going to start off with a new course that's been launched by University of Edinburgh and 5 colleges. This is a short course to bridge the gap between sort of software development, computer science, and the space industry. Really, really interesting. Jump on that QR code or reach out to us to find out more. Does anyone else have a shout out they want to do? Yes.
This ties in with some of the requests from the panel. I'm running an event on the 25th of September called Jobs of the Unknown. It's happening in the Space Centre for 1 hour from 5 p.m. And what I'm looking for is for someone in this room, many of you possibly, to come and be a sort of mystery guest, where small groups of 16 to 20-year-olds can get to meet you, find out what you do, and just explore the world which you currently live in, and they might look to join as a career. The youngsters then move around the room every 10 minutes, a bit like speed dating. So by the end of the evening, they've had conversations about 9 or 10 different data analysts, whether in the digital space or not. I've got flyers to find out a little bit more, but it's on the Data Lab community calendar, the 25th of September, Jobs of the Unknown. And if you're based in Glasgow, there's another event happening the following day on the 26th of September on the other side of the country. So I'm happy to tell anyone a little bit more later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A brilliant selling event. Last shout out. Thank you.
In the true spirit of Fringe promotion, as part of the Geospatial Fringe, I'm doing a Minecraft-themed webinar on Friday at 2 p.m. where you can have a look at my... Oh, is it up there? No, it's not there. I don't see it. Never mind. Anyway, if you like Minecraft, you like maps, you like the Fringe, and a bit of a data scraping, then, yeah, 2 p.m. on Friday.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Well, I think I would just like to wrap up with pointing to the event calendar once again. There's loads going on. Find out from me or the Data Lab team about any of this stuff. Please do jump on the community page as well. And just a big thank you to, some of the people involved in putting all this together, like NatureScope, we've got AGI, we've got Teradata. The names are up there. We've had a really, really good first event, in my opinion. I thank you all for coming and spending the evening here listening to us. And please, your feedback's always welcome. And once again, just a round of applause for the speakers.